Good morning. So we will get started. So this is A Tale of Two Techies, Pandemic Edition. My name is Stacy Kinnaird-Kutz. I'm an instructional technology specialist at Lehigh Career and Technical Institute. There's some contact information there at the end of the presentation. We will put our contact information up again if you would like to reach out to us for any questions or concerns. We also will have a QR code at the end that you can scan and a link that you can use to access the presentation after the fact if you'd like to.
My name is Dipal Kapadia,
You're muted.
And I'm here to assist Stacy.
Perfect. Okay. So sorry. The reality of 2020. So a little bit more about us. So this is just some information. So as you can see, we both have very interesting backgrounds, but we do have some pieces that overlap. We also have some pieces that are different. So as we go through this, we're going to be talking about how we work together and how that we believe has really benefited just kind of the bigger picture at LCTI and helped really influence driving technology and driving some of these changes in a very positive way. So we wanted to just give you this background to see that, as I said, we do have some overlapping pieces, but the role of the instructional technology specialist and the role of a tech director are different, and they definitely have a different experience level in the background. One thing I did want to highlight, though, that I think is kind of unique is as a technology director, DePaul has actually also taught, which makes him kind of a unicorn in the world of technology directors because it's oftentimes your technology directors may not have necessarily started as teachers. So having that perspective has definitely helped. It doesn't mean you have to have taught to really be able to understand that, but it definitely has helped. So one thing we were hoping from you, if you want to throw in the chat, if you can, where are you in kind of this sphere? Are you a teacher? Are you here as a tech director or some kind of admin supervisor? Are you also a tech coach or specialist? Where exactly do you fall in on this hierarchy here? And I think that this is a discussion that we are having that really influences all of these stakeholders. It touches on all of these, but it would definitely be interesting for us to know where exactly you're coming from as you're doing this. But we are, like I said, talking to all stakeholders. And I think the message that we have is important from every level, from every, from the top to the bottom, to lesson planning, to strategic planning. I think that we're going to touch on all those. I'll give you a minute to do that and see where we're at. Oh, I see a lot of teachers. Fantastic. You're my people. Okay, so you can continue to keep adding to that. Feel free. We're going to keep going a little bit, but we're just going to kind of get you started talking about where we got started, where this all began. So once upon a time, pre-quarantine in a school far, far away. So I started my career as a teacher. I worked in a classroom, and I have worked now, DePaul is my fourth tech director I have worked with. I like to joke, the fourth tech director I've trained, but he's the fourth tech director I've worked with. And I think in my experience, what I found the biggest problem, and this goes for both tech directors, but also tech coaches, tech specialists, and even from the teacher perspective, is not understanding what the roles are. A lot of the biggest problems and concerns that we have and start and end with not understanding what people's roles are, not understanding where they fit into this environment of education. And some of that is because both of these roles are used very differently in schools. Tech coaches, tech directors, there's not a ton of oversight and guidance from the state as to what that has to be or how you use them. So that leads to definitely some miscommunication and misunderstanding. I know I'd spoken to a teacher when I started here, and I remember him saying, and he meant it in a really, really good way, but he said, when I found out we were getting another tech staff. I didn't understand why we needed another one because we already had enough. And he didn't understand why I was being hired. And he said, I do now. I understand what your job is, and I'm grateful you're here. But leading up to it, he didn't understand what I was coming on board for. He didn't know why they needed another tech person.
So going to what is a tech director, and that has been different for different schools because there is no, again, state doesn't regulate what tech director is supposed to do, what needs to be done anywhere. No, and again, in this case, no one school has the same job description for tech director because tech directors are doing different things at different schools, which is challenging for even tech director or even anybody going into that position, which makes it very difficult to do anything. And it's a different responsibility. We need to make sure that, again, it is a unicorn position, like what Stacy says, that even though I don't want to agree with her, I kind of have to agree with her that it is a different position. And that has many of the schools' job descriptions are probably 10 years old. And we all know the technology has changed and moved along, and those job description hasn't been updated. So that's where I need to start. One of the first step is to kind of start at the bottom and then build your way up. And some of the, again, she's going through the job description, we're going through, again, they are unique, they're different. Some of the job description we've read, and it says it requires long hours, doesn't say anything else. Yes, we all know that, but it's just thrown in together and there is no cohesiveness in that job description. So that's where we need to start before if we wanted to expand everything and where we want to take this to.
And it's definitely a position that has a lot of different roles. It wears a lot of different hats, but some of the job descriptions really are looking for an instructional leader. Others are really looking for what I like to call the blinky lights guy. Some of them are really looking for a manager. So they're looking for very, very different pieces. And some of these, I think that they just copy and pasted every job description they could find and threw it all in and said, that's what we want. So it makes it really complicated to know what is a tech director. An instructional tech specialist is also kind of a unique position. So one thing that is regulated by the state is instructional technology specialist is a certification that you can earn through the state of Pennsylvania. It requires coursework, it requires an internship, and you're able to get certified as an instructional technology specialist. That said, there are schools who have technology coaches or instructional coaches that may not have this certification. So that changes it even a little bit more. But there is a recognized certification for my particular position. So in the PDE world, this is what they're looking at in terms of an instructional technology specialist. This is their job description. So don't let him fool you. He's not the only one with a whole lot of stuff to do. But this goes through more of what I would be doing. So things like the LMS, integrating with teachers, professional development, working with the teachers. So the instructional tech specialist's job really is about connecting what's happening in the technology office to the teachers and bringing that down to the teachers. So I like to say I'm kind of a bridge between two worlds. This is sometimes hanging on right now, hanging on really, really tight. The rope is starting to fray, but taking what's happening in the tech office, taking what's happening in the server closet, taking what's happening with devices and bringing that to the teachers because they're the ones with their boots on the ground. They're the ones who are applying this, working with the students every day. And right now, pandemic style, the technology has become the forefront. We are using technology more than we ever have, both for virtual learning, hybrid learning, synchronous, asynchronous, all these terms that a year ago we really weren't throwing around even in the least. And now suddenly these are daily terms that we are referencing over and over. So taking what's happening down to the level that it needs to be so teachers can apply it. So it all comes together. So way back pre-pandemic, one of the things that happened here at LCTI was, and this is not an anomaly for LCTI, but there was kind of a division among departments. So you have your teaching and they're living in their silo, and you have your tech department, they're kind of living in their silo. And what happens a lot of times is this becomes kind of a contentious relationship because back to nobody really is 100% sure what everybody else's jobs are. And there ends up being frustration because I've put in a ticket in it, my device is not getting fixed, my resource is not getting added. But on the flip side, the technology office is often working quite heavily on their own projects, their network pieces and monitoring data. So they're doing their own stuff and sometimes dealing with things that we can't even begin to imagine. And it becomes this kind of contentious relationship. Teachers often get to the point where they feel like things are being done to them and not for them or not with them. And it becomes a very frustrating place to be. So one thing LCTI did was they brought everybody to the table and they said, okay, at that point, our technology director was retiring. And what do we need to move forward? We don't want to just keep treading water. It's not enough to just keep the stuff working. How do we move forward and what do we need? So one of the things that was done was a really conscious evaluation of what does LCTI need in a tech director to move forward. And it wasn't just going to Indeed and copying a bunch of job descriptions, but it was saying, who do we already have in house and what are they good at? What are they capable of? And what do we need to support and buffer that so that when we put all the pieces together, they're as strong as they possibly could be.
And another thing with all that is developing a vision for IT and what we need to do. So after I got on board, we needed to make sure that we're building the IT vision. It follows the instructional goals with technical support and all the policy and procedures that goes with the school and also with the tech world, because all the policy and procedures that we've been using, that has been changing, and because it needs to be adapted for the real, or I should say technology world now, since that's where we are. So we've started doing that process and how we can, how we can influence budget and other resources. Again, we needed to find out what is a successful technology integration. We needed to be transparent with staff and with everyone, like what Stacy mentioned, that before there was a contentious relationship, we needed to move forward with that. So we needed to be transparent and where we are going and what we are trying to do. Because one of the things, again, I don't like surprises, and many people don't like surprises. So as long as you're including them in the conversation and telling them what's going on, be readily available, supporting curriculum goals. So again, technology is there to assist, and we wanted to build a revision with that in mind to move forward. And as you can see, again, this kind of briefly process started before Stacy or I started working here. As again, it needs to be started at the top level too. That even when the job description started to get designed and everything happened, as you can see, we have a brief snippet of it. We're both in each other's job description. We need to work together to accomplish anything, because if we're not on the same page, we are not able to assist our teachers or even administration or anyone. So we wanted to make sure that, again, we need to follow that guideline that's given to us and kind of expand upon that.
And that support is key to just build this whole situation and to kind of really build that team, because it's coming from top down. It's not just left up to whoever you hire. And if this is something that they want to do, it really becomes the vision of the school. And then hiring becomes finding the people who are able to do that and able to work together for the good of the entire institution. So we do have defined roles. Obviously, our job descriptions are not identical. We have different focuses and different goals, different things that we really take the lead on. So for a big one would be LMS versus SIS. So that's a big one, but there's also a lot of overlaps here. So one of the big things I think that often gets missed is that overlap between tech law, just law in general, and policies and procedures, and bringing that down to the teachers. So many times I've sat in presentations surrounded by administration, surrounded by tech directors, and it's talking about laws, things like, can we record a Zoom session? Can't we record a Zoom session? Can I create accounts for my students in all of these, fantastic resources? How does that look? And what are the concerns with that? The problem is a lot of times the people at those conferences, the people at those tables are your administration, are your tech directors. The people who are actually doing those things and doing the Zoom sessions, these synchronous Zoom sessions, who are creating these accounts, are the teachers. So there has to be some overlap between these two worlds, because those things can't just stay at the admin level. They have to be worked into the teachers. Teachers are trying to do amazing and wonderful things, but they don't necessarily know everything about everything. None of us do. So having these overlaps really helps support the teachers. But on the flip side, having those overlaps helps support the technology department, because we're trying to make sure everything is tied up. Securing the network, securing the data, that's his job. That's on his head. So, making sure that we can do whatever we can at the teacher's perspective really helps make sure that his job also becomes a little bit easier. So at the very beginning, these are some tips to get started. So again, a lot of this started prior to us coming on board. These were visions set by the institution. These were goals. We wanted to increase technology use, but increase good technology use, not just here's a device, but how do we really integrate that technology and build our student success and build their achievement and their capabilities. So that's the very, very beginning. And I think that that is very key, to have the administration support and to make sure that the jobs are part of the vision. But from the ground, once we are hired, some really basic tips for the beginning are set regular meetings and keep them. So rather than leaving it to chance. So you might click, like maybe you get hired and, instantly you're like, wow, we're BFFs. That's fantastic. And he's very lucky because he gets to work with me. So it was really easy for him, obviously, but making sure you set those consistent meetings, because in the beginning, you need to build that trust. So part of this relationship becomes trust, in that I trust his decision-making, he trusts my decision-making, and we don't have to constantly double check with each other. Is it okay if I tell somebody this? What about this? We trust each other's decision-making, but that doesn't happen the first day that you meet. So building that helps by setting these consistent regular meetings. In DePaul, case, we actually went to, 5 conferences in the first 8 months he was here. So that helps build communication. I joked that he was either going to, we were either going to be BFFs or he was going to quit, one or the other. And he's still here. So I guess that worked. But you have to build that process. You have to be consistent. You have to have those discussions even before you get to that point of trust, or you're never going to get there. Making meetings more than just a checklist or permission is also important. So I've seen cases where people walk in the room and it really is about this permission list. And as a technology specialist in that hierarchy of administration and teacher, and he's administration and I'm at the teacher level in terms of contracts, in terms of hierarchy. So what I've often seen happen is the tech specialist or the tech coach ends up in these meetings with like a list. Is it okay if I do this? Is it okay if I do this? Is this okay? Can I have permission for this? And that doesn't really get you anywhere. You need to have conversations and discuss, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I think our teachers need. And that leads into this, don't be afraid to ask questions, because sometimes decisions are made and I may not understand them. I may not agree with them. I may not like something that's happening. And the same is true the other way. I'm seeing teachers, he might say, I'm seeing, on the teacher's end, this is happening, or I'm concerned about this. And asking those questions and understanding, well, why did this happen? Or why is this the rule? Why aren't we recording Zoom sessions yet? You have to understand that context. And not only can that help that exact moment, it helps build the trust, because you both start building that common knowledge base.
And again, that's another thing too, that we have to be on the same page. Like what you said, that if we're not on the same page, we're not going to be able to move forward.
Correct. We will end up, he will take one step forward and I will pull everything back, and vice versa, because we're not giving the same answers. And that kind of falls into this presenting as a team, really making sure that when you're having these conversations, we are on the same team. We're on the same page. And honestly, we have to act like a team. Whether it's administration, whether it's technology department, whether it's teachers, whether it's instructional support, whatever you are, our team is to support students. At the end of the day, all of our goals, all of our missions is to get our students as far as they can, get them to be high achievers, get them to be ready for the world. And the more we can work as a team, the better. We can't just, go, oh, well, I don't like the way he said that. And sometimes I might say that, but you usually follow it with the reason why. I agree. I don't like that. And I understand why you don't like that. However, here's the reason that decision was made, or here's the background for why that decision is made. So being a team and having each other's back is very helpful. and knowing what's happening and being able to communicate is huge. So setting those meetings regularly. At this point, we do not have regular meetings set because he can't get rid of me that easily. So he gets plenty of phone calls and text messages. And so we don't necessarily need that. But in the beginning, all of those things, making it a deliberate attempt to build that trust and that working relationship is very important. So moving into that, then March happened. Okay. So everything we just kind of talked about was actually all pre-March. He was hired in June of 18 or June of 19. I feel like he's been here forever. I was hired in 2018. So everything that we've talked about up to this point was actually prior to pandemic. So all that groundwork was being done, building that rapport, building that trust, building the teamwork, making sure that we were both at the table for decision-making processes for things like we selected Schoology as our LMS. So making sure the tech department was involved in that decision, they could ask the questions they needed to ask. I could ask questions from the teacher's perspective. We could have those conversations. That was all pre-pandemic. And then March happened. And as we all know, everything changed and technology especially became the forefront. Technology was education now because students are at home, our teachers are at home. How do we make this work in a world we never imagined? And technology really, really got driven home. And everything that we built, we were so thankful that we did because that really, really helped us just get started as quickly as possible in March, make sure our teachers had what they needed, make sure that the decisions were being made with all stakeholders in mind. And at that point, there was no one department, one person that could handle everything that was being thrown around. We really needed the whole team effort. We needed everybody on the same page. And thankfully, because of all the conscious work we had put in prior, we were on the same page. And it was just a matter of moving forward with that. So these are some of the extreme key points that we've developed that we see that if you're going to make this work, and it might be, again, technology director and technology coach. The same is true with other people in the technology department, though. I don't just work with DePaul, I work with his entire department, making sure all those pieces make sense to everyone. And, sometimes I'm taking things off their plate, sometimes they're taking things off my plate, but it's working with everyone. And to that end, communication is key. Nobody likes surprises, as DePaul said. The last thing teachers needed, especially in March, was any more last minute decisions. And I know it felt like there was a million of them coming out. I get that. It felt like that to everybody because every time you made a plan, something got changed. It happened. The thing is, we did as much as we could on the back end to limit that. Things were presented and questions were asked. So I might say, you know what, I hear what you're saying, but as a teacher, here's what I think. Here's what I feel they're going to feel. Here's what I feel they're going to say. Have you thought about this? So we would go back and forth and have these discussions, big stuff, small stuff, purchasing and what are we doing for this? And what about this? We're not sitting in the same meetings. We can't possibly be in the exact same meetings all day long because as March went forward, March, April, our world became Zoom meetings. So I'd be in meetings with teachers. I'd be in staff meetings with departments. I would be in meetings with our instructional coach. I'd be in meetings with admin, sometimes with supervisors, trying to talk through some of these problems. But we can't always be in the same meeting. So communicating was key to the point that many times we ended up having phone calls at like 9 o'clock at night because till we got through all of our other meetings and then we tried to spend time with our families and then we put our kids to bed. Well, he did. My kids are always up, but then we put our kids to bed. That's when we had time. But communication was so important to make sure that we both understood that what was happening and we were on the same page. We made time for that. And if that was at 9 o'clock at night, that sometimes as spring went, that's what happened. So we need to know everything mostly. So we talk about communication, we talk about being on the same page, and that is absolutely huge. But part of both of our jobs is not necessarily knowing everything. So on my end, there is a confidentiality piece when teachers come to me, and sometimes teachers will come asking questions they don't necessarily feel comfortable going to technology for. Not every teacher feels very confident in their technological skills. And to have to go to a network specialist and say, I don't know, did I not plug this cord in correctly? Am I not hitting the right button? It becomes very awkward for them. And it's nothing to, be upset about, nothing to be embarrassed about, but it's the reality. So making sure teachers have a safe space when they have those questions that they may not feel comfortable. I'm not running back to the tech office and saying, oh my gosh, can you believe this teacher asked me this ridiculous question? That's crazy. It's not ridiculous to them if they don't know it. So there is a confidentiality with that. There are things that I talk to teachers about in terms of instruction, and those are things that the technology office doesn't necessarily need to know. There are things the teachers really just need a safe space to work through. So they don't know everything. But on the other hand, things like Schoology, for example, we can't make an instructional decision on Schoology without knowing the technological backbone of that, without knowing how's that going to sync with the SIS. We had our data support specialist come in and make sure he could ask all the questions he needed to ask with Schoology to make sure before we signed on, we knew exactly how the syncs were going to work and exactly what data we needed to pull. And it was so important to have both of us on board because Schoology became education. In spring, Schoology became it. Same thing with laws and policies. Teachers were trying to do amazing things. They just didn't necessarily have that knowledge base of all the laws, procedures, policies that were being rolled out, that had been rolled out in the past. So sometimes it was like, ooh, pump the brakes on that. I love the idea, but there's a reason we can't do that.
So again, going back to like what she's saying, that but technology has to be involved in everything. We've had it in the past, like we were talked about that the job description weren't, but technology has to be at the forefront. Even pre-pandemic, we need to move in that direction because everything happens now. Everything is including technology. Even building maintenance, we're talking about the building maintenance systems are online, so those are housed in on the IT server. So if IT wasn't involved in those discussion or this decision, how are we going to be prepared to even support the building, and how are we going to do anything in the building? So we need to make sure that IT is included in everything, even though again, we can or cannot. It's I think we're way beyond that, and especially with the pandemic, we need to make sure IT is there, because if they don't know something, how are they going to be able to assist or fix? So as much as entire building or administrators, teachers provide more information to the IT staff or IT people, they'll be able to assist, because again, it's always you going blind and something here it is. We need to work on this, but we need to know the background for everything. And again, I'm going to say that too. Not as IT, we don't know all the softwares. We don't know all the different servers and everything. We need to learn that too. So if there is something new, we need to assist. We need to prep for it. And if we don't have that prep time, we're not going to be able to assist anyone. So we need to make sure that we're involved in every conversation. And that's how we can support the teachers, administration, and again, our students. That's why we're here. So if we wanted to support our students, we need to be included in those conversations to support them. So again, yes, it's not the old school IT. We are more than blinky lights. It's not for managing the servers, just servers. We have to make sure that now, for example, social media accounts are out there. We need to make sure what kind of guidelines, if our teachers have a social media's account, and how are we gonna, what they need to post, how everything going to go. So we are in a completely different world. We need to make sure that we're prepared to assist them all the different. That goes with the policy and procedures. If there is a social media account for teachers, how are they submitting? Again, we need to come up with the policy for that. Again, we need to come up with the policy for virtual learning, Zoom, Google Meet, whatever you're using. We need to make sure that we're supporting all that and included in those conversations. So now it needs to be done a lot more. Again, technology is there to build the bridges, and if we are not able to involve in those conversations, we can't build those bridges. So that's one of the things. And that's why I say role of IT has changed drastically from 10 years or 15 years prior. And again, pandemic has changed it completely. So we need to make sure that we come up with this structure that provides all the help. And what Stacy mentioned earlier, the Schoology or Skyward or our system Skyward student information system. So we need to make sure that both are talking. So now, because of everything is going on, as administration, we decide to make a grading change. How is that grading change going to be able to support into our student information system? IT needs to know so we can provide those, we can create those steps and we can provide those assistance to get to that, the final goal of grading change process, for example. But if we don't know anything about it, and if that's, hey, this is what we want to do, our system might not be able to do that. So we need to make sure that we're all included in those conversations. Again, that will make students' life easier because we're supporting them better. It will make teachers' life easier because they're able to get the knowledge they need. Because again, it's always a problem throwing a technology to a teacher and while they don't know or they weren't trained on something. So we need to make sure, and again, IT is included in everything, and we need to make sure that the IT is at forefront and it's moving beyond just those blinky server lights.
And I think too, not only has the role of IT changed, but I think one of the things that I've seen happen in schools, ours and beyond, the role of IT has changed, but the perception of what IT does maybe hasn't. So I think there's a perception that IT is the blinky lights guys, and I call them the blinky lights. I call them that all the time. I also call them a unicorn, but they keep the things working, and we are way beyond just making sure it works. We're beyond, as long as it works, I can leave, because it's not just about do the blinky lights stay blinking. That's important. My surface turning on, that's important. But what's important is not just that it works, it's that it works for what I need it to work for. And I know how to do that. And that's that integration piece. And in March and April, when decisions were being made, when PD was saying, here's how grading needs to be done, here are the guidelines for attendance, and here's how we're going to do that. Those were not conversations I was necessarily involved in, but DePaul was. So he was able to sit there and say, okay, I see what you're saying for attendance. I see what you need for grading. Here's what I think Schoology is capable of, here's what I understand. So they could kind of make a plan, and he could come back and say, okay, here's the plan. Schoology does this, right? Here's what I think Schoology. So had he not had a base understanding of our LMS, had he not been involved in those conversations, he could not have sat in those admin conversations and been able to support their decision making. That is way beyond just keeping the blinky lights blinking. So not only do I have to recognize that, but the institution has to recognize that, the teachers have to recognize that. That's a systematic change that needs to happen. They're not just the guys that in the closet, and I don't know why IT guys keep getting shoved in. That's their office. They like find a closet and they put them in there with no windows, although they joke they have enough windows. So ha ha ha. But that's a systematic change that needs to happen in order for true tech integration to happen. They can't just be the guys who get called in to fix things and that's enough. They need to be involved in that conversation. So we balance each other in that we are two sides to the same coin. We both have the same vision. We both have the same goal, but we are coming at problems, concerns, issues with two different perspectives. So I keep the teacher at the forefront of my mind. I'm not going to say DePaul doesn't, but he's also dealing with things like data security. He's dealing with things like record retention rule, policies, and all of these things that may not be at the forefront of everybody's mind. So when we're doing things like something as simple as a teacher who wants to use a new resource, an app, coming up with a policy that allows him to maintain security, him to stay in compliance with FERPA and COPA and everything we need to stay in compliance with is very important. But we also need to realize that teachers need to be able to teach. They can't spend their entire time just doing paperwork. So if we have a lengthy document with language on it they don't understand, they end up not using technology because they find something and they don't know what to do with it. On the flip side, I understand the perspective of the tech office where we can't just approve every single resource that's out there. It's not safe. We can't secure it. How do we pull that data if we ever would need it for a right to know request? So we have to kind of do those things. So we looked at the needs that our teachers had. We looked at the needs the tech department had. We looked at both sides. We come together and we figure out a procedure that works for both. The same is true for professional development. making sure the teachers are trained on what they're trained on. And sometimes there's frustrations that happen on both ends. And when you actually sit down and look at the root cause ends up being maybe there was a lack of training, or we thought we trained, but when we actually look back, we trained teachers maybe 6 years ago, and we have a lot of new teachers since then, and they may have gotten missed. So sometimes the frustrations and the problems go back to root causes, like we need to provide them different training, more support. So we're looking at two different perspectives, but by bringing those perspectives together, we're not just putting Band-Aids on problems, we're able to really come up with a solution that works more long-term. We support each other always. And I chuckle because the notes for this one say tickets. And yesterday I went, ticket? Oh, yes. So we do support each other. And as I said, I don't go to teachers and say, oh my gosh, can you believe he did this? Although sometimes maybe, maybe. But we do support each other. We make sure, because we have the same vision, we have the same end goal. But one of the things, and I feel like I can hear the chuckles through the empty Zoom room here, but tickets, tech tickets, whether like at our school, we use Sherpa. So if something's not working, please put in a ticket, please put in a request ticket, please put in an IT ticket. They become like this curse word of technology repair. And I think they've been associated with requests. And many times teachers feel like it's a request that's just going to die in space and they never get answered. However, that's not true. And as a teacher, I think you have to realize, as a teacher, this not working is super important. This is my day-to-day. I have a room full of 20 kids. If this one thing is not working, it does feel world ending to me. And I don't want to put in a ticket. I just want to call them. But on the back end, those tickets are very, very important long-term. So they help the tech staff support the teachers in the best way possible. So I know in our office, we have multiple technicians down there who can bounce it back and forth. If I'm not here, that person can pick it up. If they're not here, they can pick it up. They also can take notes. So let's say this person is out, so somebody else is picking up the ticket. They can actually go back into the notes and say, oh, that's how they fixed it last time. It saves time. It tracks things. It makes sure things don't get lost in the endless emails that we get. So tickets do become one of those things. And I understand from a teacher perspective, it is frustrating when this thing does not work in front of me and all you say is put in a ticket. I get it. I've been there. But they really are useful. So supporting teachers on things like that as well, like, well, listen, there is a reason for it. And sometimes that becomes the communication piece as well. Being transparent, communicating with the staff and saying, this is why. It's not just put in a ticket because I don't want to have to deal with your emails. It's put in a ticket because it actually in the long run helps you quicker. It doesn't feel like it, but I promise it's true. We sometimes don't agree. It happens. When you bring two different perspectives to the table, sometimes we don't have the same perspective. Sometimes we don't have the same idea. And one thing that works pretty well for us is neither of us usually pull punches. And I guess that popped in my head because of the Bitmoji, but neither of us pull punches. So if I don't like something, I have no problem explaining to him exactly why. And the same is true. He will definitely give me his opinion. He doesn't mind. So we don't always have to agree. We have to come to a conclusion that works the best, but we may not agree. And sometimes that's the lack of understanding that goes back to asking questions, having a discussion, explaining rationale. Sometimes I don't get a rationale. Sometimes I just get no. And I'll explain later, or I can't tell you why, but the answer is no, which drives me crazy. But sometimes that's where it ends up. But we don't always agree. We don't always have the same perspective. We're not coming at it from the same lens. But we have to get to a point that we agree. And otherwise you end up with that mom-dad scenario where he gets asked the same question I get asked, and they're hoping we give different answers because then they can follow the one that they actually like the answer of. So we disagree sometimes. But when we go forward, we need that united front, because otherwise it does not help the institution at all for us to be undermining each other and going behind each other's back and saying, oh, no, that's not right. So that is very important.
Which is going back to like what she said, sometimes we don't agree, But again, regardless of hierarchy or whatever we're doing, we're all working together. So the two things are collaboration and communication. At any point, that is very important between IT office or any other department or anything, especially between our jobs as a tech coach and IT department. We need to make sure that we're collaborating and communicating on a daily basis on what's going on. And that is one way you can build a relationship and trust. That's what, so even though when she's making and saying something, I'm aware of it and what's going on. And same way, again, building bridges between department, like I said before, and an entire school. So it is very important that we collaborate and communicate with each other.
And in terms of the hiring hierarchy, that's something I've seen actually work both ways. So in our institution, he is considered admin, and I would be at the, I'm on a teacher contract level. So in terms of hierarchy, he technically is above me. He's not my boss, but he's technically above me. But that's a relationship, that's a dynamic that you have to be aware of, because I've also been in schools where the opposite is true. And the person in charge of technology, the technology supervisor, is not necessarily seen as an admin, but you might have a curriculum director who is, or someone who's acting in a similar role as an instructional tech specialist trying to guide the instruction. The reason you have to be aware of that is not necessarily because at the end of the, it's not because one of you is more important than the other, one opinion is more important. When it comes to those things like those building bridges that way back in the beginning, setting up those meetings, it becomes complicated, especially in the beginning, for the person who may not be at the top of the hierarchy to say, hey, DePaul, I need these meetings. I want to have weekly meetings, because he's an admin and he's super busy and he's all these things. And, if he says he's too busy, then what am I going to do? And it becomes awkward. Especially if, however your institution is set up, you're the one at the higher end, make sure you make it a priority, because it is kind of awkward when you're not. You feel like you're forcing things. You're like, maybe I'm speaking out of turn. Maybe this is not how it's supposed to be. So make sure you're aware of whatever the hierarchy is, so it doesn't get in the way of your vision and progress.
And I do like to say no a lot. Again, and I want to clarify that it's, I think, if you're a teacher or if you're administrators or, from IT perspective, we like to say no. It's not because there are times we don't want to do this or anything, but that message might not be relayed properly. But what I want to say that it's not no because we don't want to do something or we just want to know the bigger picture of it, how it's going to fit everything, because there are so many things out there. And again, conferences, I've talked with the other tech directors and stuff, and it's like after conferences, we know, they're going to conference, here they're going to come with the list of things that they want to do. But we need to make sure that we can support those things, because yes, there is a great tool out there, but if on our back end, if IT can't support it, it really doesn't matter if that's a great tool. So we need to make sure that whatever is coming, we can support it as IT and we're ready for it. So again, the tool doesn't really matter anything if we're not deploying it properly. So again, as I mentioned before too, that not all IT we don't know all the systems out there. So we need to be familiarize ourselves with all the system before we can move forward and we can say yes. So that's why even if you hear no from many tech directors or anything, they're not saying no because they don't want to do anything. And I want to kind of put that out there, that we want to make sure that we understand before we can implement anything.
He does say no a lot, like a lot.
Which I like it.
he really likes to say no.
So, and again, going to set boundaries. There are times that we've seen it in many that, hey, this is the IT department's job or this is tech coach's job. We don't want to do anything. But going back to, if we need to include it in every conversation, we need to be part of everything. And again, IT has no lanes anymore. IT is going all over the place. So even though there are boundaries, if I am saying in my boundaries, it means I'm not doing my job as an IT director, because if there is something going on and if we are not doing it, or if we're not raising the question, or if we are not addressing it, just going back to, we went into virtual learning. Everyone wanted to, going to Zoom meeting or Google meeting, but we wanted to make sure that we're ready for that. We have appropriate policy and procedures to support that. So that's why I'm saying that if we are not included in that conversation, and again, going back to, we need to make sure that we improve IT and we include them in the conversation. And so there is no boundaries for IT. And it kind of goes with the tech coaches too, even though we want to, I can say that she needs to stay in her lane. No, there are times she needs to cross that, and she needs to understand how everything works on up to, so she can support the teachers better. Because if she doesn't have it on the little bit background knowledge of what we're trying to do, she's not going to be able to support, or she may say something that she shouldn't say something. But if I need to really keep her in the loop on what direction we're going and how we're approaching this, so it makes her job easier, which, matter of fact, eventually makes my job a lot easier. So that communication process, so even though we're saying that there is a boundaries, there are no boundaries for IT anymore, because we're in everything so-called, and we're involved in all the projects and throughout the school and every department.
I still have a hard time staying in my lane, but I try. So going forward,
again, going back to, recapping it, that we still need to, regardless of pandemic, no pandemic, we need to create a vision. We need to include teachers, we need to include administration, we need to include IT, we need to include tech coaches. We all need to be on the same page to support our students. Again, eventually goes back to our students. If we are not working together, or if we are not communicating better, and if you're not serving our students, we're not here, we're not doing our job. So we want to make sure that even with the technical support, even with instructional goal, policy, procedure, whatever we're doing, we need to make sure that we are supporting our students. Again, many of the schools throughout this, that they've completed their 3 years worth of initiative in 6 months. It's not the right way to do it, but that's where we were faced with that situation, and all the schools had to do that. So again, we cannot accomplish that if we are not communicating, if we are not all on the same page. So we need to make sure that that's where we need to start, and that's where all of us need to start to, again, support our students. We can't really go back. We need to move forward together, and that's the important part. And so we can keep moving along. And again, pandemic is here, it's not going anywhere, and we need to support our students regardless of whatever situation we are in. So again, it's work in progress. We are not there. What we're saying, again, we are still work in progress to, again, support our students.
As long as you have that vision, that consistent end goal, the consistent vision, you can disagree. You can not always see eye to eye. You can have different lenses, but you have to keep the end goal in mind. And doing that really helped us pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. And as he said, we cannot go backwards. This is not how any of us expected education to go in 2020, but we've all made progress. We all have changes that we've made in our instruction and, tools we've acquired and are now utilizing on a daily basis. We never, ever would have, including Zoom. The amount of teachers who are now using Zoom quite fluently is amazing. We can't go backwards. So how can we keep moving forwards at the same rate of speed that, maybe not the same rate of speed, but we can slow down a little. But how can we keep everybody moving forward? All the stakeholders, the teachers, the students, because we all really have the same end goal. So again, this is our information. If you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, ideas, you want to reach out, this is how you can get in touch with us. We're both at Lehigh Career and Technical Institute. That QR code will take you to the presentation, and I can share the link to the presentation in the chat as well if you're unable to access the QR code. And if there are any questions, concerns, comments.
You do have a question in the Q&A panel. Can you see it?
Yeah, any advice for a new technology coach and almost new IT coordinator? I think the biggest advice I can have, and I'll let him speak sometimes. The biggest advice I have is really work on forming that communication and trust, because everything else is going to come with that. If you don't talk to each other, and again, you don't have to start as best friends. You don't have to start as even liking each other, to be quite honest. But starting that communication and making sure that you're having those conversations. Like he came on board. I mean, I knew a little bit. Like I could say, well, where did you work or what are your degrees? But that doesn't tell me what he knows. Doesn't tell me if he appreciates the teacher perspective. That doesn't tell me how much he values what I do as a job and how much. And the same is true. He has no idea how much I know about the infrastructure. How much do I know about tech law and tech security? How much? We don't have those conversations. We never find that out. If we don't find that out, it makes it really hard to have those relationships where we can communicate and we do have trust in each other and can, have that dynamic.
One of the things I would like to say in that, in regardless any position, if you are as a tech coach or even tech director, tech coordinator, one of the things you want to do is don't just do something, ask those why questions. Because if you're not asking why, and again, that doesn't mean even if somebody else asks you why, that doesn't mean that they're trying to, do something that, or make you do something that you don't want to, or, but if you're not asking those why questions, you don't know the question or you don't know where you're going with it. So we need to ask those why questions to find out more information about hey, why are we doing it? Because if we are changing grading process, but if I can't support it or, more information, we need to keep asking those questions. And that is sometimes difficult to do, but going out of your way and do that, that's what I can tell you, to do more and get involved and listen to everything, what's going on. You're not going to be able to support anything if you don't know the entire plan or entire system. So getting to know everything is an important thing too.
I think putting your ego aside too, and knowing that you are all going to the same thing. So like he said, if he doesn't agree with something or I don't agree with something, or you're asking those questions or you're asking those whys, start out with, these questions, these whys. It's not I'm challenging you. It's not that I don't trust you. And it's not about me. It's about the institution. It's about the students. It's about education. It's about integration. And at the end of the day, that's the goal. It's not about what I'm able to accomplish. It's not even about what he's able to accomplish. It's about what are our students able to accomplish and what are our teachers able to accomplish. And honestly, the end goal is that. It's not about how awesome we are, although I am pretty awesome. But it's about really getting our egos out of the way and saying this is about our students and our teachers. And that means having those sometimes uncomfortable, like I don't agree with you conversations, and knowing it's not personal. It's not that I don't agree. It's not that I don't think you know what you're talking about. I may not understand what you're talking about, and we need to have those. And sometimes I do it, putting ego aside, there are times I need to ask questions that I kind of feel stupid myself asking because I did not have my educational training in a server closet. I probably don't drop me in a server closet and ask me to do anything. I understand them, but you don't want me to start plugging and unplugging things. But I may need to ask a question that I think is stupid, and knowing that he's not going to judge, or at least he's not going to let me know he's judging. He might still be judging. I don't know. But at least I feel comfortable asking those questions.